They walked in carrying my family's crest. Only 5 men hold one.
One of your 5 was there. He let it happen. He smiled.
He still has a seat at my table. For now.
Blood was never supposed to mix with the scent of vanilla. When Chicago's most ruthless syndicate boss found the woman he secretly loved beaten on her bakery floor, he didn't call the cops. He locked the doors, asked one question, and by midnight, the city's underworld began to burn. The neon sign of the sugar hearth buzzed a flickering, angry red against the wet pavement of West Grand Avenue. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of caramelized sugar, rising yeast, and the sharp, metallic tang of copper. Maggie Lawson lay on the black and white checkered linoleum, staring up at the tin ceiling. She was 32 years old, a size 20 woman who had spent her entire life trying to make people happy through the comfort of food. Her body, soft and abundant, was usually her sanctuary, a testament to late nights testing recipes, of savoring the rich, buttery pastries she sold to the suits in the Loop. But tonight, her body felt like a sort of white-hot agony. Her thick thighs throbbed where a steel-toed boot had connected. Her apron, dusted with King Arthur unbleached flour, was now stained with dark, blooming patches of crimson from her split lip and a gash above her eyebrow. "You're a fat, stupid pig, Maggie," Richard Denton had hissed just 20 minutes earlier, his tailored Brooks Brothers suit perfectly crisp, while his knuckles were raw. "You think because you bake cupcakes you're exempt from the toll. You pay the Castelli family, or we burn this place down with you inside." Denton wasn't a mobster. He was the assistant district attorney for Cook County, a man who appeared on the evening news promising to clean up the streets while quietly running a shadow extortion ring using the city's most feared mafia family as his boogeyman. Maggie couldn't pay the $5,000 monthly tax he demanded. The bakery was barely surviving the inflation of ingredients. So Denton and his 2 off-duty CPD goons had made an example of her. Now the bell above the bakery door chimed. Maggie flinched, curling her plush body into a defensive ball, a whimper tearing from her bruised throat. She expected Denton's men to be back with gasoline. Instead, the heavy, measured footsteps that echoed through the quiet shop belonged to Leonardo Castelli. Leo wasn't a man who entered a room. He consumed it. At 6'3", wearing a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit that clung to his broad shoulders, he was the undisputed king of Chicago's criminal syndicate. He owned half the real estate in the Gold Coast and had politicians in his pocket from Springfield to D.C. But every Tuesday and Friday night, at exactly 9:15 p.m., he came to the sugar hearth for a box of Maggie's famous blackberry scones. More accurately, he came for Maggie. He loved her quick wit, her unapologetic laugh, and the way her soft, heavy curves looked wrapped in her aprons. In a world of plastic hollow women who threw themselves at his wealth, Maggie was entirely real. She was grounded, warm, and fiercely independent. Leo had spent 6 months slowly breaking down her walls, earning her shy smiles, terrified of pushing too hard and scaring her away with his dark reality. "Maggie?" Leo's deep, gravelly voice called out. He rounded the glass pastry case. When his dark eyes landed on her crumpled form behind the counter, the air in the bakery seemed to drop 20 degrees. The devastatingly calm demeanor that made him a legendary boss shattered. He didn't run. He stalked toward her, falling to his knees on the hard floor, uncaring as the blood and flour stained his $1,000 trousers. "Leo," she gasped, trying to sit up, her hands scrambling to pull down her skirt, suddenly hyper-aware of her exposed, bruised thighs. Even now, The deep-seated insecurities about her size flared up. She didn't want him to see her like this, swollen, bleeding, and vulnerable. "Stop. Do not move, Mia Luce," Leo commanded, his voice a low, terrifying rasp. He didn't look at her body with pity or disgust. His hands hovered over her, trembling with a violent restraint as he assessed the damage. The cracked ribs, the swelling eye, the fingerprints bruising her pale, plump arms. He stripped off his suit jacket, gently draping it over her shaking shoulders. The scent of his Tom Ford cologne and dark tobacco enveloped her, making a sob break free from her chest. Leo's jaw clenched so hard the muscles ticked. His eyes, usually a warm mahogany when he looked at her, were now obsidian pits of pure, unadulterated murder. He brushed a blood-matted curl from her forehead, his leather-gloved thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "Who did this to you?" he asked. The question wasn't a plea. It was a death sentence. "Leo, please, you can't." "He's powerful," Maggie choked out, clutching the lapels of his jacket, pulling him closer to her soft chest. "Maggie." Leo's voice was barely a whisper, yet it roared in the silent room. "Look at me." She forced her good eye open, meeting his lethal gaze. "There is no one in this city more powerful than me," he said with terrifying certainty. "Give me the name." She swallowed the copper taste in her mouth. "Richard Denton, the assistant DA. He said I owed the Castelli family. He said he was collecting for you." The silence that followed was deafening. Leo didn't shout. He didn't curse. The terrifying stillness of a true apex predator settled over him. Denton hadn't just brutally assaulted the only woman Leo Castelli had ever loved. He had used Leo's own name to do it. It was a double desecration. Leo pulled a secure satellite phone from his pocket, dialing a single digit. "Vincent," Leo said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "Lock down the city. No one leaves. Bring Dr. Keller to the penthouse, and assemble the capos at the meat-packing plant." He paused, looking down at Maggie's bruised, beautiful face. "We are going to war." Dr. Harrison Keller, a former chief of trauma at Northwestern Memorial, who had lost his license for operating on mobsters off the books, worked in absolute silence in the master bedroom of Leo's penthouse at the St. Regis, Chicago. Maggie lay on the California king bed, dwarfed by the massive, dark silk sheets. She felt exposed in the oversized t-shirt Leo had carefully dressed her in, her soft belly and thick legs hidden beneath a heavy duvet. Dr. Keller had taped her 3 cracked ribs, stitched the gash on her eyebrow, and prescribed a heavy dose of painkillers. Leo stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline, smoking a cigar. He hadn't spoken since they arrived. His silence was heavier than the thunderstorm brewing over Lake Michigan. "She's stable, Mr. Castelli," Dr. Keller finally said, packing his leather medical bag. "No internal bleeding, but the bruising on her torso and thighs is severe. She needs rest and absolute safety." "She has it," Leo replied, not turning around. "Thank you, Harrison. Vincent will see you out." When the heavy oak door clicked shut, Leo finally moved. He crossed the sprawling bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress. The mattress dipped under his weight. Maggie looked up at him, the painkillers making her limbs feel heavy, but her mind was racing. "Leo," she whispered, her voice raspy. "I'm sorry. I bleed all over your car. And your suit." Leo's expression broke. A look of such profound agony crossed his face that it stole her breath. He leaned down, burying his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent. Vanilla, sugar, and the metallic tang of trauma. "You apologize for bleeding on my leather seats when you were almost beaten to death," he murmured against her skin. "I should have been there. I should have protected you. You are everything to me, Maggie. Everything." Maggie's heart hammered against her sore ribs. She had always thought Leo's attention was a fleeting fascination. Men like him, rich, devastatingly handsome, powerful, didn't fall in love with fat, struggling bakers. They married supermodels and socialites. But the desperation in his grip, the way his large hands gently framed her round hips as if she were made of priceless porcelain, shattered her doubts. "Denton is a prosecutor, Leo," she warned, tears pricking her eyes. "If you go after him, the FBI, the mayor, they'll all come for you." Leo pulled back, his eyes locking onto hers. "Let them come. By dawn, they will be too busy cleaning up the bodies of Denton's men to look in my direction." He kissed her forehead, lingering for a long moment before standing up. He checked his Patek Philippe watch. It was 11:45 p.m. "Sleep, my beautiful girl. The men outside this door will die before they let anyone cross the threshold. When you wake up, the monsters who touched you will no longer exist." Down in the subterranean garage of the St. Regis, Vincent Lombardi was waiting beside a fleet of black Cadillac Escalades. Vincent was Leo's underboss, a ruthless, calculated man who had grown up with Leo in the bloody streets of the Little Italy faction. "Boss," Vincent said, holding open the door to the lead SUV. "Denton is currently at a private fundraiser at the Drake Hotel. He's celebrating a new polling bump for his district attorney campaign. His two muscle guys, Detectives Miller and Hayes, are drinking at a cop bar in Wrigleyville." Leo slid into the back seat, adjusting his cuffs. "Miller and Hayes first. They put their hands on her. I want them taken alive. Bring them to the warehouse. And Denton? Leave him at the Drake for now," Leo said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "I want him to watch his empire crumble before I take his life. Start hitting his money." Within the hour, the hunt began. It was a surgical, brutal orchestration of violence that Chicago hadn't seen since the days of Capone. But this wasn't about business. This was about vengeance. At 1:15 a.m., Detectives Miller and Hayes stumbled out of O'Malley's pub on Clark Street. They never made it to their cars. 3 unmarked vans boxed them into an alley. Before the corrupt cops could reach for their service weapons, silenced tasers dropped them to the pavement. They were dragged into the darkness, zip-tied, and driven south toward the Stevenson Expressway. Simultaneously, Leo's men hit Denton's illegal operations. Denton had been using the Castelli name to extort not just bakeries, but independent laundromats in Pilsen, small construction crews in the South Loop, and immigrant-owned grocery stores. At 2 a.m., the Castelli enforcers kicked down the doors of 3 different stash houses where Denton kept his extorted cash. The men guarding the money, low-level thugs who thought they were protected by the ADA's badge, were given a simple choice: leave the city in the next 10 minutes or die. The money, millions in illicit cash, was seized, packed into duffel bags, and immediately driven to the neighborhoods Denton had robbed, left on the doorsteps of the victims with a note, courtesy of the real Castelli family. By 3:30 a.m., the city's criminal ecosystem was in a state of sheer panic. Phones were ringing off the hook in the mayor's office, the precinct captains' homes, and the local news desks. Rumors spread like wildfire. The Castelli family was purging the streets. Every man in the city who had ever crossed a line, who had ever exploited the weak, felt a cold sweat break out on the back of their necks. If Leonardo Castelli was willing to declare war on a high-profile prosecutor, no one was safe. Back at the Drake Hotel, Richard Denton was drunk on expensive scotch and his own arrogance. He was in a VIP suite, surrounded by sycophants and high-priced escorts. He had no idea his muscle was currently strung up by their wrists in a freezing meat-packing warehouse, crying for mercy. He had no idea his stolen fortune had vanished. He didn't know that the devil himself was on his way up the elevator. The elevator doors chimed at the penthouse level. Leo stepped out, flanked by Vincent and 4 men holding suppressed automatic weapons. The 2 private security guards, standing outside Denton's suite, took one look at Leo's face and immediately dropped their weapons, stepping aside. You don't fight a hurricane, you just pray it doesn't take your life. Leo kicked the double oak doors open. The heavy wood splintered and crashed against the walls. The music in the suite died. The escort screamed, scattering. Denton. His tie loosened, and a glass of scotch halfway to his mouth froze. The color drained from his face as he recognized the man standing in the doorway. "Castelli," Denton stammered, trying to mask his terror with false authority. "What the hell is the meaning of this? I'm the ADA. I can have you arrested right here, right now." Leo didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need to. He walked slowly across the plush carpet, stepping over spilled champagne and discarded heels. He stopped inches from Denton, looking down at the corrupt politician with eyes that held the absolute void of hell. "You made a mistake today, Richard," Leo said softly, the quiet tone infinitely more terrifying than a shout. "You used my name to steal from innocent people. That I might have forgiven. But then, you put your hands on Maggie Lawson." Denton's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. He finally realized exactly what he had done. "Bring him," Leo commanded, turning his back. By dawn, every man in the city would know. You do not touch the queen of the Castelli family. And for Richard Denton, the night was just beginning. The heavy steel doors of the Fulton Market cold storage facility slammed shut, sealing off the outside world. Inside, the temperature was a bone-chilling 34 degrees. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed, casting long, sickly shadows across the concrete floor. Richard Denton was thrown to the ground. The bespoke fabric of his Brooks Brothers trousers tore against the rough, ice-slicked concrete. He scrambled backward, his breath pluming in the freezing air, until his spine hit a steel pillar. Hanging by their wrists from heavy meat hooks 10 yards away were Detectives Miller and Hayes. They were stripped down to their undershirts, shivering violently, their faces bruised and swollen. They weren't dead, but the sheer terror in their eyes said they wished they were. Leo Castelli walked into the center of the room. He had removed his tie, and his white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the dark ink of a syndicate oath tattooed over his collarbone. He looked less like a businessman now, and entirely like the monster the city whispered about. "Castelli, wait! We can make a deal!" Denton screamed, his voice cracking. "I have connections. Judge Arthur Harrison owes me. Mayor Bradley Thompson is my godfather. You kill an assistant district attorney, the feds will pull your entire organization apart." Leo stopped a few feet from Denton. He pulled a silver Zippo lighter from his pocket, the metallic clink echoing sharply in the cavernous room. "You think I care about Arthur Harrison?" Leo asked, his voice a low, vibrating hum of pure menace. "I bought Harrison's mortgage 3 years ago. Thompson? He called me at 2:30 a.m. begging for my forgiveness after my men relieved him of his offshore accounts. You have no one, Richard. You are entirely alone." Vincent stepped out from the shadows, dragging a heavy metal chair. He kicked Denton behind the knees, forcing the politician down into it, and quickly zip-tied his wrists to the armrests. "Why her?" Leo asked. He leaned in, the smell of his expensive tobacco masking the scent of copper and freezing ammonia. "Of all the businesses in the West Loop, why the Sugar Hearth?" Denton swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically between Leo and the hanging detectives. "It was business, Castelli. Just business. She wasn't paying the neighborhood tax." Leo's fist shot out, moving with a blinding speed that defied his massive frame. He struck Denton squarely in the jaw. The sickening crack of bone echoed off the frozen walls. Denton spat a mouthful of blood and a molar onto the concrete, weeping hysterically. "Do not lie to me," Leo whispered, grabbing Denton by the hair and yanking his head back. "Maggie's bakery is completely out of your jurisdiction. You went out of your way. Why?" Denton sobbed, his bravado entirely shattered. "Because of you! I knew you went there!" he wailed, the pathetic truth finally spilling from his bloody lips. "We had an informant at the precinct. He said the untouchable Leo Castelli spent 2 nights a week drinking coffee with some fat baker. I needed a high-profile bust to secure the DA election next month. The plan was to squeeze her until she broke, get her to wear a wire, and record you admitting to the extortion rings. We were going to frame her if she didn't comply." A deadly silence fell over the room. Denton hadn't just shaken Maggie down for money. He had targeted her specifically to get to Leo. He had exploited her vulnerability, her business, and her very body, all to build his own political throne. "She fought back," Detective Miller groaned from the hooks, his voice raspy and broken. "She wouldn't wear the wire. She told us to go to hell. Said you were a good man. That's why we hit her. To teach her a lesson." Leo released Denton's hair, stepping back. The rage that radiated from him was no longer hot and explosive. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of cold, calculated fury that toppled Imbias. "She is a good woman," Leo said softly. "She is a woman who spends her days bringing warmth to this miserable city. Her body, her heart, her spirit, they are perfect. And you," he looked at Denton with pure disgust, "called her a pig. You put your filthy hands on a queen." Leo turned to Vincent. "Take the detectives down," Leo ordered calmly. "Break their hands, every single finger. Make sure they can never hold a badge or a gun again. Then drop them on the steps of the FBI field office with the ledgers of every dime they stole." "And him?" Vincent asked, gesturing to the sobbing ADA. Leo looked at Denton. Killing him would be too easy. Death was a release. Leo wanted this man to suffer exactly as Maggie had suffered, helpless, ruined, and stripped of everything he held dear. "Don't kill me," Denton begged, urine pooling beneath his chair. "Please." "I'm not going to kill you," Leo said. "By tomorrow morning, the Chicago Tribune will receive a package. It contains high-definition video of you accepting bribes from the cartel, alongside the recorded testimonies of the 30 small business owners you extorted. Your bank accounts have already been drained and donated to domestic violence shelters in Maggie's name." Denton's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. "No. My career. My life." "Your life is over," Leo stated. "You are going to Florence, ADX, Richard. You will spend the rest of your pathetic existence in a 6x9 concrete box, but before the feds find you tied to a lamppost on Wacker Drive." Leo picked up a heavy steel wrench from a nearby workbench. "I believe you owe my future wife a debt for her broken ribs." The screams that echoed from the Fulton Market warehouse that night were not heard by anyone on the street, but the message they carried would reverberate through Chicago's underworld for the next century. The morning sun broke over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in vibrant shades of bruised violet and burning gold. Inside the penthouse of the St. Regis, the world was entirely still. Maggie stirred, a soft groan escaping her lips as the dull ache in her ribs flared. She blinked her good eye, the heavy painkillers making her thoughts sluggish. For a terrifying second, she thought she was back on the cold linoleum of the bakery, smelling blood and yeast. But then she felt the absolute warmth enveloping her. She turned her head. Leo was sitting in a velvet armchair pulled right up to the edge of the mattress. He had finally taken off his blood-stained shirt, wearing only a pair of dark sweatpants. His massive chest and arms were covered in a tapestry of scars and tattoos, a violent history mapped on his skin. He was awake, watching her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Good morning, Mia Luce," he murmured, his voice a gravelly caress. "You stayed awake all night," Maggie whispered, her voice rough. "I will stay awake for the rest of my life if it means keeping you safe," he replied. He leaned forward, resting his large, warm hand gently against her plump cheek, careful to avoid the bandages. "Is it over?" she asked, the memory of Denton's cruel words and heavy boots flashing behind her eyes. "Turn on the television," Leo said softly. He handed her the remote. Maggie clicked it on, the screen flashing to the local morning news. The anchor looked visibly shaken. "Breaking news this morning out of downtown Chicago. Assistant District Attorney Richard Denton has been arrested by federal agents after being found incapacitated and tied to a street lamp outside the Dirksen Federal Building. A massive cave of evidence detailing widespread extortion and corruption was left with him. Sources say Denton suffered severe physical trauma and is currently under heavy guard at Cook County Hospital. Detectives Miller and Hayes have also been implicated." Maggie muted the television, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at Leo. There was no boastfulness in his eyes, no arrogant pride, only a fierce, unwavering devotion. "He called me a pig," Maggie whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek, the deep-rooted insecurity bubbling to the surface. "He said I was fat and stupid. And when they hit me, I felt it, Leo. I felt every pound of myself. I felt so weak." Leo moved from the chair, carefully sliding onto the bed beside her. He gathered her into his arms, his massive frame shielding her entirely. He didn't avoid her soft stomach or her thick thighs. His hands roamed over her curves with absolute reverence, as if he were holding something sacred. "Listen to me," Leo said fiercely, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You are not weak. You stood up to corrupt men with guns, and you didn't break. You protected me. You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known." He pressed a soft kiss to her uninjured temple, then down to the soft, full curve of her neck. "And your body," he murmured against her skin, making her shiver despite the pain, "is perfect. I love every inch of you, Maggie. I love your softness. I love your warmth. When I hold you, it is the only time in my miserable, violent life that I feel peace. You are not a baker to me. You are my queen. And today, the whole city knows it." Maggie let out a ragged breath, burying her face in his chest. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the need to shrink herself. She didn't feel the need to apologize for taking up space. Wrapped in the arms of Chicago's most feared man, she felt entirely, beautifully invincible. Down in the streets below, the criminal empire of Richard Denton was being swept away like dust. The politicians were terrified. The police were scrambling. and the syndicates were bowing their heads in renewed respect. Every man in the city feared for his life. But in the penthouse in the clouds, the mafia boss simply held the woman he loved, kissing the sugar and vanilla from her skin, vowing that no one would ever touch her again. If you loved this story of brutal vengeance and unexpected romance, don't keep it to yourself. Smash that like button, share this video with your fellow drama lovers, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, real-life inspired mafia tales. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you were in Maggie's shoes? Hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story.